Learning from ties that drift apart and still remain. The story began one evening on a narrow dike in Kosala. Sayana was a middle-aged man who had lived in the same village all his life. In his mind, faces came and went like fading lanterns. Brothers who had once run along the fields with him. Friends who had shouted and laughed at the riverbank. Children who had grown up and walked toward their own distant towns. He sat on the dike and thought to himself, did I choose the wrong people all my life? If everything drifts apart like this, were these ties ever worth anything? Then the Buddha came walking slowly along the field path with his disciples. He stopped near Sayana and spoke gently. What kind of water is flowing through your heart this evening? Sayana told him the truth. He spoke of brothers who no longer wrote, a spouse whose words had grown fewer, children who lived far away, and the hollow feeling that all his relationships had scattered. The Buddha pointed to the narrow channels running between the fields. Look at these rice fields, he said. From here they seem like separate pieces of land. But if you follow the water, you see it flows from field to field. Then down into one river. Human ties are like this water. People grow close, grow distant, meet in part. But for a time, they shared the same water in their hearts. They walked, ate, and cried together. And in those moments they eased one another's thirst. Do not only count who stayed and who left, the Buddha continued. Remember also the seasons when you shared the same stream. Those days left soft soil in your heart. On that soil, you can still take one gentle step toward the people you meet today. Sayana looked down at the water glimmering between the fields. He felt something loosen inside his chest. The faces that once hurt to remember now felt like fields that had once shared rain. If you also think of ties that have drifted apart and feel empty inside, may you remember that even brief companions once shared the same water with you. And may you still feel that, even now, you can take one soft step closer to the person you meet today. When it feels like everyone is busy except you. Tonight's story began in a small market town in Kosala. Asita had spent his life pulling a cart to the market and back. He woke before sunrise and returned after sunset for many years. When his legs and shoulders grew weak, he finally gave the cart to a younger man. At first it felt strange, but pleasant to sleep a little longer in the morning. But soon the days began to feel empty and loose. People hurried past his door on their way to fields and shops. No one called his name for help with loads or errands anymore. He watched them walk and thought, everyone is busy and needed somewhere. I feel like I am the only one left behind. His only words some days were small greetings at the village well. Sometimes the woman at the side dish stall smiled and praised his face. Sometimes he went to the temple for a small gathering and chanting. Yet on the way home he still wondered, can someone my age really make new friends? What if I go to a group and only make the room feel awkward? One evening he walked alone along the riverbank. Across the water he saw a forest rising on the hill. Thick trees, thin trees, tall trees and small trees stood side by side. Their branches overlapped and formed one wide, cool shade on the ground. The Buddha came walking along the path and stopped beside him. What kind of wind is passing through your heart this evening? He asked. Asita spoke honestly. I left my work and my cart behind. Now it feels like I belong nowhere. These small meetings at the well and the temple feel too weak to matter. The Buddha pointed to the forest across the river. Look at that shade beneath the trees. He said, one great tree alone cannot make such a wide, cool place. It is thick trees, thin trees, tall and small trees standing together. Only then does a forest shade appear where tired people can rest. He turned to Asita again. The short greetings at the well, the simple talk at the stall, the chanting at the temple. They are like those trees making shade together. Even if each connection feels small, together, they become a safe, cool place for the heart. You are not a tree standing outside the forest, he said softly. You are already one of the trunks inside it. It is only your own thought that keeps you standing at the edge. Asita felt something loosen in his chest. He looked again at the forest across the river. The shapes of the trees were all different, but their shade was one. If there are days when you feel that everyone is busy except you, may you remember the small faces at the shop, the well, or the quiet hall. They may already be your forest, giving you a gentle shade to rest in tonight. When in-laws feel half a step away, Tonight's story began in a small village in Kosala. Devana was an older woman, whose son had moved to the city with his wife, Lavini. They were one family, yet their hearts still felt half a step apart. Devana wished to treat Lavini like her own daughter. But each time she spoke, she feared her words would sound like meddling. If she told her to rest, it might sound like blame. If she told her to do as she wished, it might sound cold. So she held back and asked only small things about meals and chores. Lavini also wanted to relax around her husband's mother. She felt grateful, but she feared crossing an unseen line. So she smiled politely and hid her deeper thoughts. One morning, after her son and his family left, Devana swept the yard alone. The Buddha passed through the village on his alms round. After receiving her offering, he looked at her gently. He asked what kind of thoughts were resting in her heart. Like a heavy bowl, Devana spoke honestly about her awkward distance with Lavini. She said she did not know how near she could step without causing hurt. She said she was afraid her words would sound like control or complaint. The Buddha picked up an empty bowl and held it in both hands. He said that when one hand holds the bowl alone, it fears dropping it. Then he called a monk to stand opposite and help support the same bowl. Now the two hands stood in different places, but they held one bowl together. The Buddha said that in-laws are like these two hands. One hand is the elder who has long protected the house. The other is the younger who has come to help carry it forward. They do not look the same, but they care for one shared bowl. He told her to see that she and Lavini were supporting the same family from two sides. From that heart, her words could become help instead of interference. Lavini's words could sound not like challenge, but like a hand reaching for the same bowl. If there is a son-in-law or daughter-in-law who feels half a step away, may you remember that you do not need a perfect parent and child bond. It is enough to stand as two hands slowly, learning to support one shared life, when you still set a place at the table for someone who is gone. Tonight's story began in a small riverside village in Kosala. Suma was an older woman who had recently said farewell to her husband Dayaka. In earlier years they shared a wooden table and spoke about each day. Now there was only one bowl left on the table. Many evenings Suma took out two bowls by habit, then quietly put one away. The sight of the empty place made her chest ache. She told herself, I should eat alone now. I should forget and move on. But whenever she remembered her husband, she felt guilty, as if she were holding him back. When she tried to push the memories away, her heart felt even more empty. One evening Suma finished her meal and sat in front of her house. The river shone with the last red of the sun. Above it, small stars slowly began to appear. The Buddha came walking along the village path and stopped beside her. What kind of light is touching your heart under this evening sky? He asked gently. With a trembling voice Suma answered, my husband is gone. Sometimes I think I must forget him to live on. But when I remember him, I feel I am clinging and doing something wrong. The Buddha pointed first to the small lamp inside her house, then to the night sky. When the oil is gone, the lamp in the room goes out, he said. It seems as if the light has disappeared. But look at the sky. When the sun sets, its light has not truly vanished. It returns in other forms, as starlight and moonlight, shining in a different way. Human connections are like this. Two people share one room, one table, one lamp for a time. One day, one of them leaves first. The seat at the table is empty, but the light does not end there. It lives on in your words, your steps, and the kindness of your hands. If you only cling to the empty chair and weep, your heart will be tied down. But if you eat slowly and remember the warmth that person left in you, then it is not clinging. It is walking together in a new form. That night Suma lit a small lamp and placed an extra wooden bowl on the table. She looked at the empty bowl and whispered in her heart, thank you for eating with me again tonight. If you also have an empty seat at your table, may you know that your bond does not exist only in what has ended. It may also live quietly as a different light, still walking beside you this evening, when you fear being a burden to your child. Tonight's story began in a small river village in Kosala. Madura was an aging mother who now spent most evenings alone. Her son Santaka had gone to the great city to work as a merchant. Traders sometimes brought short letters from him. Mother, I am well. Business is busy, so I cannot visit often. Madura always answered, I am fine here. Do not worry about me. But she thought, if I speak of my pain, I will become a burden. So she folded only calm words into each letter. When no message came for a long time, her chest began to ache. I chose not to speak, so I must endure alone, she told herself. One evening, as the sun turned the wide river red, Madura walked to the old pier. My son is like one of those boats, she whispered as she watched the river. I do not want to tie him here. But I do not want him to forget this shore. The Buddha came walking along the river path and stopped beside her. What kind of waves are moving through your heart tonight? He asked. Madura lowered her eyes and answered softly. My son is far away and busy. I hide my loneliness so I will not trouble him. Yet when no word comes, I feel small and ashamed of my longing. The Buddha looked at the pier and at the small lamp hanging there. Children are like ships that must sometimes travel far, he said. Parents are like a pier with a small light on the shore. It does not hold every ship in place or pull them back with ropes. It simply stands where it is and lets its light be seen. When you tell your child that you are living each day, that you sometimes feel tired or lonely, it is not always a heavy load. Sometimes it is only a small light, saying, this shore still exists for you. Madura felt something loosen quietly in her chest. She could be a quiet pier with a modest light, saying, I am here. I still think of you. That night she wrote a new letter. I am still here by the river, lighting a small lamp for you each evening. My heart feels tired at times, but it rests when I think of you. I do not ask you to hurry home, only to remember that this shore is still shining for you. When neighbors who are not family keep you alive. Tonight's story began in a small village in Kosala. Setia was an older man who now spent most evenings alone. His children had moved away and his parents were gone. There was the woman at the well who gave him a small nod. There was the shopkeeper, who smiled and said, you came today as well. They were not family, yet their short greetings gently warmed his chest. One day a thought rose in him like a shadow. They are not my family or close friends. What if I act friendly and they feel uncomfortable? From then on his greetings grew shorter and his eyes turned away. One evening he went to the village well with his water pot. People from many houses were there, drawing water in simple silence. At that moment the Buddha came along the dusty road and stopped by the well. He looked at Setia kindly and asked, what fills your heart at this well tonight? Setia hesitated, then let the words come. My house feels more and more empty. My family is far away and my old friends are busy. These people at the well are not my family. I am afraid they may feel bothered if I speak too much. The Buddha looked into the water and then at the homes around. This well does not belong to one house alone, he said. People from near and far come here to draw water. Yet all of them depend on this one place to live each day. He pointed to the stones at the mouth of the well. Someone brushes away dust and fallen leaves. And watches the children. These small efforts together protect the water that keeps the village alive. Then the Buddha turned to Setia and spoke softly. The human heart is like this well. Family and close friends may draw deep jars of water from it. But daily strength also comes from small cups. A nod from a neighbor at the well. A shopkeeper who says, you came today as well. These are little cups that quietly moisten a dry heart. That night, on his way home, Setia met a neighbor near the well. This time he spoke first and bowed his head a little. Thank you for your work today, he said. A faint smile rose on both their faces like a small lamp in the dark. When you only meet an old friend in your thoughts. Tonight's story began in a village in Kosala. Rahana was a middle-aged man who had once worked side by side with his friend Samita. Back then they promised that when they grew old, they would walk slowly along the river together. But the years passed and their roads split. Messages through traders became fewer and then stopped. Now, when Rahana lay down at night, he met his friend in his thoughts. He sometimes whispered, if I told this to Samita, how would he laugh with me? Then another voice answered, if I appear now, will I only bother him? What if he has already left this world and I am too late? One evening Rahana went to the forest edge to gather firewood. There he saw a narrow path they had used in their youth as a shortcut. Once it had been clear and firm. Now tall grass covered it and the trail was almost gone. His chest tightened as he looked at it, as if this overgrown path was his friendship itself. At that moment the Buddha came walking from the forest toward the village. He saw Rihanna standing still and asked gently, "What is your heart looking at on this path tonight?" With a trembling voice Rihanna spoke of his old friend and the long silence. He said he was afraid to visit and afraid of being a burden. He feared also that Samita might no longer be alive. The Buddha pointed to the path and said, "Once many feet walked here. When the footsteps stopped, the grass grew high. To the eye it seems the path is gone. But the ground still remembers the way. When even one person steps again, the grass bends and the path begins to return." Then the Buddha said, "Old friendship is like this. The road between hearts may be covered by time, but it is not lost. The step you fear is not his anger but your own first step. Even if you reach him only in your heart, you can still place one footprint." That night Rihanna held an old belt he once shared with his friend. He decided that at the next market, he would ask traders about Samita's town. Even if they never met again, he would not keep the path only as a memory. He would place one living footprint toward his friend in this life. The day her grandson spoke only with a small drawing. Tonight's story began in a small fairy village in Kosala. Yusara was an old grandmother who now lived mostly alone. Only the thought of her grandson, Rianta, kept one corner of her heart warm. These days he sent short messages through a trader passing by. On a small piece of wood, he drew a round smiling face and wrote only a few words. The drawing was sweet, but the words were so few that her heart felt a little empty. If I ask for more, I may trouble him, she thought. If I stay silent, I feel as if I am being forgotten. One evening she met the Buddha on the riverbank path. The Buddha asked, "What kind of waves are moving in your heart this evening?" Yusara spoke of her grandson and her loneliness in a trembling voice. The Buddha pointed to a tree by the river and said, "Under the ground the roots hold the tree so it does not fall. The trunk stands between the roots and the sky. The new branches reach upward first and meet the wind and sunlight before the rest. You are like the roots that have held this family for many years. Your grandson is like a new branch reaching toward the sky." His way of speaking may seem strange, but it still grows from the same tree. The small drawing he sends carries one clear meaning. "Grandmother, I am still connected to you." Yusara's chest loosened as she listened. "What should I do?" she asked softly. The Buddha said, "Do not try to teach him with many heavy words. Send one gentle line, like a root sending strength through the ground. Tonight the river water is quiet and bright. I hope you are breathing softly wherever you are. One line like this is enough." That night she wrote a short message and gave it to the trader. Watching a small leaf float on the water, she whispered in her heart, "Even with short words and simple drawings, our hearts are still connected." An evening when words have grown fewer between a long married couple. Tonight's story began in a small fairy village on the river. In the land of Kosala, Jataka and Malika were a couple who had lived together since their youth. There was a time when they went to the river together at dawn to wash clothes and prepare bundles for the market. They would sit by the water and share the day's events and the worries in their hearts late into the night. As the years passed and white strands appeared in their hair, their days grew quieter. When they sat at the table in the evening, their words became shorter. "Did you take your medicine today? The night air is cold, did you close the door?" They had never had a great quarrel, but their hearts seemed to be slowly stepping away from each other. One evening the two of them happened to meet on the riverbank path. Soon after, the Buddha was seen walking along the river toward the village, with an awkwardness in their hearts. They went toward the Buddha and bowed quietly. The Buddha looked at them with gentle eyes and asked, "On this evening, what kind of wind is blowing in your hearts?" Jataka opened his mouth to speak. "We are a couple who have lived together for a long time. We have not had great fights, and we do not wish to leave each other. But these days, the day passes with only talk of weather and medicine. We are in the same room, yet it feels as if our hearts are looking at different places." Malika added her voice softly, "It is not that I have come to dislike my husband, but when I try to bring out what is in my heart, it feels awkward and the words do not come." The Buddha pointed to the dirt path beside the river and spoke, Think of the road the two of you have walked together as a line of footprints. There were days when you walked side by side, laughing. There were days when one walked ahead in anger, and the other followed behind. Yet if you look at the footprints as a whole, they move apart and come together and still remain on the same path. When you were young, you spoke of what kind of road lay ahead of you. Now the road you have already walked together is long. This is the time when you can look at that road side by side. When you return home today, do not end the evening only with talk of weather and medicine. Choose one footprint from the road you have walked together and share that memory with each other. That night the two of them sat facing each other across the dinner table. After a brief hesitation, Malika asked quietly, "Do you remember when we first came into this house?" Jataka smiled slowly and answered, "Of course I remember." It was only a short exchange, but a gentle warmth began to spread through the places where their hearts had grown stiff. Beside you, who are listening to this story, there may also be someone who has lived with you for a long time yet speaks less with you now. Tonight, rather than thinking about what more you must do tomorrow, may you recall one footprint from the road you have already walked together. The night he remembered his brother across the river. The story began in a small fairy village on the river. In the land of Kosala, Salaba and his younger brother Roaka had grown up together, playing by the same river and working in the same fields. They were once closer than anyone else in the village, but one year they argued over a small piece of family land. Harsh words were spoken, and neither wanted to give in. After that day they stopped talking, even though they still lived by the same river. When they met by the water, each one only looked toward the other bank. One evening, Salaba met the Buddha near the river. The Buddha asked him gently what kind of waves were moving in his heart. With a trembling voice, Salaba confessed that he and his brother had grown old without speaking. He said he felt ashamed, but also stubborn, as if speaking first meant he had lost. The Buddha pointed to two men drawing water on opposite sides of the river. They turn their backs to each other, he said, but they lift water from the same river. When the water grows low, the Buddha continued, both must step closer to the edge to drink. Then, even if the banks do not move, their faces come closer into view. He said that in the same way, when hearts begin to dry, someone must step a little closer first. A first step toward the water is not losing, but saving the connection. That night, under the river mist, Salaba made a quiet decision. Tomorrow, he would take even one small step toward the path that led to his brother's house. If someone comes to your mind as you hear this story, let this thought arise softly. I do not have to cross the whole river today, but perhaps I can move one step closer to the water. The night he learned to live with observation and gratitude. The story began in a small village near Savati. Looking over the fields, Badia had lived there his whole life as a quiet middle-aged man. He was known as someone who listened well to other people's stories. He heard sighs at the village well, worries in the marketplace, and small late joys of his neighbors. But his own heart often asked a painful question. What have I really achieved in this life? He had no great fame, no special name that others would remember. His children had left to live their own lives, and his house felt more and more empty. One evening he walked along the narrow path on the field embankment. He saw many fields spread out before him. Some fields were already golden and full with heavy grain. Some were still green and thin, waving in the wind. Some had been planted late, and only tiny sprouts had just begun to appear. Badia looked at them and wondered, among all these fields, which one is my life? Later he went to the hillside where the Buddha was staying. He confessed, my life feels too ordinary and empty, as if I have not really succeeded in anything. The Buddha pointed toward the many fields below. From up here, he said, every field is simply passing through its own season. The early and the late, the full and the bare, all are touched by the same sun, wind, and rain. A human life is like that, too. Some lives show their fruit early, some much later, some only in small quiet ways. So do not look only at what you have achieved. Learn to observe the path you have walked, and to feel gratitude for each breath that is still here. That night, walking home under the soft moonlight, Badia began to see his life not as an empty field, but as land that had already known many seasons. If your heart also feels that your life has not been a success, Let this story rest beside you tonight. May you gently notice the small lights that have already grown along your path, and offer them a little gratitude. And somewhere in your own heart, may a quiet thought arise. Even now, I can still take just one step today. The day he first learned it was okay to fail. The story began in a small village in Magadha, in a quiet workyard. Sagara grew up hearing the same sentence again and again. If you are going to do it properly. He carried that voice into his whole life. Whenever he wanted to try something new, another thought appeared. If I cannot do it well, I should not start at all. So when people made pots, baked bread, or dyed cloth, he watched from a distance and said to himself, if I spoil it, I will be ashamed. One day Sagara walked to the hill where the Buddha was staying. The Buddha asked him gently, what kind of fear is sitting in your heart today? Sagara answered, I am so afraid of failing that I do not even begin. I feel I am growing older without really learning anything new. The Buddha pointed to some bread, pots, and a piece of dyed cloth. He said, the first bread is often half raw inside and burned outside. The first pot leans to one side and sometimes cracks in the fire. The first cloth often takes the color badly, and becomes patchy and uneven. People call these things failures. But without a first bad bread, how would we learn the right fire? Without a first crooked pot, how would our hands learn balance? Without a first uneven cloth, how would we feel the right color and time? On the path of learning, the Buddha said, clumsy hands are not shameful, they are doors opening. What matters is not a perfect result. What matters is that your heart is moving toward what you wish to learn, instead of freezing in fear. That evening Sagara went back to the dye workshop in the village. He said to the young dyer, I may be clumsy, but today, I would like to try my first dyeing, if you allow. The cloth he touched came out with spots and streaks. But inside his chest there was a new, soft feeling. For the first time in his life, he had begun a kind of learning where failing was allowed. The late little joy she finally allowed herself. The story began on a small evening road near Savatthi. Varana had worked since she was a child, always for survival and never for joy. She believed that doing something just because she liked it was a luxury for other people, not for her. Now her children were grown. Her husband was gone, and her days had a little empty space. In that quiet space a shy wish sometimes rose up. She wanted to draw lines in the dirt, or carve a small bird out of wood, or hum a song to herself. But another voice quickly covered it. At this age, how can you play like that? It whispered. You will look like an idle old woman who has nothing better to do. One evening, walking back from the well, she saw the red sunset fade and a pale moon slowly appear. A thought touched her heart. There is a light that can be seen only after the sun goes down. Later, she went to the forest where the Buddha was staying. She told him, I have worked all my life, and only now do I want to do small things that make me quietly happy. But I am afraid people will say I am childish at this age. And I also feel ashamed of myself. The Buddha pointed to the sky and said, in the day the sun shines with great strength, but only after it sets do the moon and stars appear. The light of the evening is also real light, and it gently covers the whole day that has passed. In the same way, a late small joy is not foolish play. It is like evening light on your whole life. That night, under the moon, Varana held a piece of wood and began carving a tiny bird. Her hands were clumsy, but her chest felt quietly warm. If you also have a small joy that came late, may this story sit beside you tonight. It is not too late, and you are not silly, to let your own evening light finally shine. The day an elder learned it was okay to learn from the young. The story began in a small hill village near Savatthi. Looking over the fields, Mahananda had spent his whole life as the elder, who knew how to farm, trade, and solve problems. People would say, if something happens, go and ask Mahananda. But one year the fields began to look different under younger hands. Young farmers brought new seeds, and new ways of guiding water through the land. They spoke of things they had seen and heard in distant towns. Watching from a distance, Mahananda thought, now they know more than I do. His heart quietly wished to learn, but another voice rose up inside. Am I now to learn from children? Must I, who always taught, sit down and say I do not know? One day he walked to the hillside where the Buddha was staying. The Buddha listened as he confessed his shame and pride. I want to learn from them. But a part of me keeps saying, I am too old to ask, he said. The Buddha pointed to a tall tree, and the small sprouts growing at its roots. This great tree has lived through many seasons, he said. Its roots are deep and its trunk is strong, and many rest in its shade. But when spring comes, who feels the change of wind and warmth first? It is the small sprouts that break the soil and meet the new air. Even a great tree listens to the news of the seasons, carried by its sprouts. The Buddha looked kindly at Mahananda. You are like the great tree, and the young are like fresh sprouts. You gave them roots, and now they touch winds you have not yet felt. Being older does not mean you must always stand above. It can also mean knowing when to bend your ear and learn. Later, back in the village, Mahananda walked to the young farmers at the field. With a slow breath he said, I do not know these new seeds and water paths. If you are willing, please teach me what you have learned. Their faces lit up with gentle surprise and joy. They said, it would honor us to share this with you. That evening Mahananda felt not smaller, but more together with them. Tonight, if you feel too proud or too shy to learn from the young, let this story rest beside you. It is not a loss of dignity to learn. It is how old roots and new sprouts grow into one forest. The evening he learned to say I don't know. The story began in a small village near Savatthi on a quiet evening. Sanaka was known as a wise man, and people came to him for advice about their lives. The older he grew, the more questions they brought, and the less certain he felt inside. Many times his heart whispered, I really do not know. But he was afraid people would be disappointed if he said that. So he kept speaking as if he was sure, and his words began to feel like an empty bucket. One evening, after giving another answer that did not feel true, his chest felt hollow. He walked up the hill to where the Buddha was staying among the trees. The Buddha listened quietly as Sanaka confessed his fear of saying, I do not know. I was afraid they would lose trust in me, he said. The Buddha pointed to a deep village well nearby. Look, he said, the water does not reach the top stones, and they remain dry. A wise well knows its own depth and leaves the empty part unfilled. It gives only the water it truly holds. A person is the same. Saying I do not know is not weakness. It is knowing the real edge of your understanding. Later, when a worried father came for advice, Sanaka took a slow breath. This time he said, there is a part of this that I do not know. But I can feel your love and fear, let us look for the path together. The father's shoulders softened, and he replied, hearing you say that somehow makes me feel more at ease. Tonight, if you have tried to carry every answer alone, let this story rest beside you. It is all right to say I do not know, and to let honesty, not pretending, be the place where hearts can breathe. The day someone who always helped others finally asked for help. The story began on a dusty village road near Savatthi. In the late afternoon, Nanda had spent his whole life putting others first and running to help whenever someone was in need. He held ladders, carried loads, watched children, and said yes before anyone finished asking. But when his own heart was tired, he always said the same words. I am fine. One day he tried to carry a heavy sack of grain, and his knee suddenly gave way. Pain shot up his leg and the world turned white for a moment. Neighbors rushed over and asked if he was hurt, but he only smiled and said he was fine. That night his knee throbbed and even standing up was difficult. Yet he still thought asking for help would trouble others. At last, with a stick in his hand, he slowly walked up the forest path to where the Buddha was staying. Seeing Nanda's face, the Buddha gently asked, what kind of burden did your heart carry all the way to this place today? Nanda confessed that he was now too tired to carry everything alone, but was afraid to ask for help. If I ask, I feel weak, and afraid that I only bring trouble to others, he said. The Buddha pointed to two trees in the yard that leaned gently toward each other. Look at those two trees, he said. If one tree were to fall, would the other not shake and perhaps fall with it? They stand by sharing weight, not by standing alone. Helping is not the only form of goodness. Receiving help is also a kindness, because it gives another person the chance to stand beside you. As Nanda listened, tears slowly gathered in his eyes. For the first time he thought, maybe letting someone support me as also a way to let them love. Tonight, if you have carried everything alone and only said, I am fine, may this story gently remind you that it is all right to lean a little. How someone who cared for everyone finally learned to care for herself. The story began at a small village well in Magadha on a quiet evening. Sarah had spent her whole life caring for her parents, her husband, her children, and her neighbors. Her body was tired and her heart felt empty. But whenever she tried to rest, guilt rose up first. If I sit down and breathe for a moment, I must be lazy and a bad daughter-in-law, she thought. One morning on the way to the well, she stopped and turned her feet toward the forest path where the Buddha was staying. In the quiet yard, the Buddha saw her and gently asked, What kind of burden did your heart carry to this place, so early in the day? I have always cared for everyone else, she said. Now I am exhausted, but when I try to rest, I feel like I am abandoning my duty. The Buddha pointed toward the village and spoke softly about the village well. If no rain falls for a long time and the well dries up from the bottom, then travelers and villagers can no longer drink. When the well that gave water becomes dry, it can no longer give to anyone. For the well to share water again, rain must fall and fresh water must slowly gather inside. Your body and mind are like that well. The time you spend sitting quietly, breathing, and letting your body rest is not laziness. It is rain sinking into the well. Without that time, one day your well will show only dry stones. And even the people you love will have no water to receive from you. Sarah listened and thought, I am also a well. I must not be allowed to dry out. A new thought appeared softly in her heart. I am not a lazy person, I am a person learning to pause my breath, so I can love longer. Tonight, if you have been caring for everyone but yourself, let this story be a small cup of water for your own heart. Before sleep, place one gentle breath in your own hands and whisper inside, I will keep my well so I can keep loving. Learning to see slowly when the body grows slow. The story begins in a small village near Savati at evening time. A man named Sagara walked slowly along the dirt road, feeling his knees ache. In the past he walked faster than anyone and carried heavy loads for others. Now his legs hurt, his breath grew short, and he often made others wait for him. He thought to himself, I have become a burden with these slow feet. That night Sagara could not sleep easily, and turned again and again on his mat. He remembered hearing that the Buddha was staying in a forest monastery near the city. Before dawn he finally rose and decided to walk there, even with his heavy legs. He walked more slowly than in his younger days. But something was different. He felt the cool earth under his feet, and saw dew shining on the grass. Light between the trees touched his eyes more clearly than before. When he reached the monastery, the Buddha was sitting under a great tree. Sagara bowed and sat down, breathing hard. He said softly, Buddha, I used to walk quickly and work in front of others. Now I walk slowly and make people wait. And I feel useless and ashamed. With this slow body, can I still be of any worth? The Buddha pointed toward a small river below the hill. Look at the water there, he said. In some places the water runs fast and rushes past many things. In other places it becomes a quiet pool and stays very still. Fast water goes far, but it does not hold a face for long. Only the slow, calm water can keep a face reflected for a long time. The Buddha looked at Sagara gently. Your body has moved from fast water to a still pool. Now you can see the faces, the light, and the road more clearly than before. Your slow steps invite others to rest and to look around. This is also a kind of learning. On the way home, Sagara walked even more slowly on purpose. He noticed each stone and leaf beside the path, and the quiet smile of a neighbor. He thought to himself, I am no longer a rushing river, but perhaps I can become a still pond where life is seen more clearly. A single line to hold when the heart shakes. The story begins in a small village near Savati on a quiet evening. A middle-aged woman named Mahala walks home from the well, carrying her water pot. On the way she hears people talking about an evening chanting at the forest monastery. They say the Buddha's disciples are teaching a short line of verse to whisper before sleep. Mahala's heart moves a little, but she thinks to herself, at this age, how can I learn anything new when I cannot even remember well? For several days she hesitates, feeling shy and afraid to forget every word. One evening she quietly leaves dinner prepared at home and walks toward the forest path. In the monastery yard, people sit in a circle, while a monk recites one short line. For this one breath only, let me guard my heart gently. Everyone repeats it together, and Mahala also moves her lips. But the words break and she cannot finish. Shame rises in her chest and she begins to step back. At that moment the Buddha walks into the yard and softly asks, "On this evening, what wind is moving in your heart?" Mahala answers, "The young can remember long verses. But I cannot hold even one line, and I feel ashamed to sit here." The Buddha points to a small lamp at the edge of the yard and says, "Even if you do not know the whole road, one small lamp is enough to show the ground beneath your feet in the night." He continues, "No one crosses a wide river in one leap. You begin by placing your foot on the first stone in front of you. And today you have already stepped on that stone." Walking home in the dark, Mahala gently repeats to herself, "For this one breath only, let me guard my heart gently." If your memory also feels weaker now, may this one small line be like a lamp in your chest whenever your heart begins to shake. When you sit to learn at this age. The story begins in a village near Savatthi. A middle-aged man named Varana sat in his yard and looked at his rough hands. They had worked with earth and wood all his life, but had almost never traced a letter. One day he heard that at the forest monastery, people were learning to read a short verse. He whispered, "At this age, can I really sit there and learn?" Shame rose in his chest, yet before dawn, he quietly left home and walked toward the forest. In the monastery yard, children were copying letters on the ground. Varana sat in a corner and held a stick. But his first line shook and bent and a few children hid a smile. He thought, "I do not belong here," and began to rise. Just then the Buddha came into the yard and looked gently at him. The Buddha asked, "For what does your hand wish to learn?" "That you walked here this morning?" Varana answered, "I have worked with soil and wood all my life. And only now I wish to learn letters. But I am ashamed because I am old and clumsy." The Buddha pointed to a tree where one late flower was opening, and said, "The first blossom is not the only flower. And a late blossom also has its light." He added, "When your heart moved once more, a new shoot began inside you, and your place as a late learner is not less." On the way home, Varana decided he would walk the same path again tomorrow before dawn and thought, "Even if my letters are crooked, one small flower of learning can still open in this life." When you want to change but feel you cannot change anything. Tonight's story begins in a small village near Savatthi. In the early evening, a middle-aged man named Sanaka is sitting in his yard, quietly sighing as he looks back on his day. He has promised himself many times to be less angry, and to speak more gently to his family. But after a few days he always seems to fall back into his old ways. A thought slowly settles in his heart. Maybe I am someone who cannot change anything. One day he hears that the Buddha is staying in a forest monastery near Savatthi. Before dawn he follows the dim path through the fields, and walks toward the forest. The Buddha sees Sanaka sitting under a tree and gently asks, "This morning, in which direction is your heart looking?" Sanaka confesses that he has often said he wants to change, but he feels like a man who has never kept even one promise. The Buddha takes a small stick and draws a straight line on the ground. "If you turn your foot just a little to another side here," he says, "at the far end you will stand in a completely different place." A human life is like this. It is not only when a whole mountain moves that life changes. It is when the direction of one step changes. The problem is not that you never moved, the Buddha continues. It is that you demanded one great change all at once and grew tired. Walking here at dawn, filling the water jar, folding the clothes before you left home, all of these are already small points on the path. From tomorrow, do not try to fix every habit. Choose one very small step that you can watch for just once. In a single day. Hearing this, Sanaka realizes he is not a man who has changed nothing. He is someone who has already begun to turn his direction many times. On the way back to the village he looks down at his feet and thinks, "Today, what I can change is not my whole life, but the direction of this one step." If you also wish to change but feel you cannot change anything, tonight you might gently ask yourself not about a big new life, but about one small step. your heart can face toward as you breathe in and out. Perhaps that small direction will show you a different landscape. On some future day, when a heart cannot forgive for a long time. The story begins one evening in a village by the river in Magadha. A woman named Badia was sweeping her yard, and an old hurt she thought she had forgotten quietly rose again. Years before, she had started work with a close relative she deeply trusted. When things went well, that person changed the promise and erased her share with just a few words. In front of others it sounded as if Badia had simply stepped back on her own. She lived on as if it was all in the past. But whenever she saw that face in the market, her chest still burned. One day Badia crossed the river and walked to the forest monastery to see the Buddha. The Buddha looked at her gently and asked what kind of mark remained in her heart. Badia said she could not forgive, and that she now disliked both the other person and herself. The Buddha pointed toward a large stone by the river. He said that in a heavy rainy season, a rock had been carried there and became stuck. The river could not throw out the rock, but it did not stop flowing. In the same way, a sharp word or betrayal had become a rock in her heart. The rock did not have to vanish for her life to move. The Buddha said that forgiveness was not forcing herself to forget or saying the wrong was right. It was deciding how to keep walking while still carrying the wound. She could choose not to pass on the same kind of hurt to another person. That choice could become a new direction for her life. If you too have a hurt that still aches after many years, may this story sit beside you tonight. You may not forgive completely yet, but you can still choose one small, gentle step for your own heart. When every day just feels like passing by. Tonight's story begins in a small village near Rajagaya. As the sun is setting, a middle-aged man named Sagara stands in his yard, emptying a wooden basin and staring at the sky. There is no great joy and no great sorrow in his heart. Only the feeling that he has simply endured another day. He wakes, works, eats, lies down, and starts again. And every day feels almost the same. When he thinks of tomorrow, it seems no different from today. One day he hears in the market that the Buddha is staying in a forest monastery near the city. People say many come with heavy grief or burning anger and find comfort there. Sagara feels his life has no big drama, only a quiet emptiness, but one evening he looks up at the dim sky and thinks, maybe even this kind of heart can be shown to the Buddha. The next morning he wakes a little earlier than usual. Before leaving home he fills the water jar, washes some rice, and places it neatly in the kitchen. He sets a small ladle by the jar, in case a neighbor comes for water while he is away. It seems like nothing special, yet his chest feels just a little more steady. When he reaches the forest monastery, the Buddha is sitting quietly under a tree. The Buddha looks at him gently and asks, "What kind of current is flowing through your heart this morning?" Sagara answers in a soft voice that he is simply enduring his days. No great happiness, no clear sadness, only gray time passing by. The Buddha points to a small tree at the edge of the forest. When heavy rain comes, people remember the thunder and lightning, but it is the countless small drops that truly soak the earth. In the same way, it is not only great joy and great sorrow that water a life. It is also the small breaths, small kindnesses, and small steps that quietly keep a heart alive. Then he asks, "What did you do before coming here today?" Sagara speaks of filling the water jar and washing the rice. The Buddha nods. That too is a raindrop. A tiny drop of water and care. That may ease someone's thirst and hunger. Tomorrow morning, do not try to change your whole life at once. Instead, add just one small raindrop more than today. A gentle word to someone, a kind word to yourself, or one deep breath while you smell the rice cooking. If you keep noticing these small breaths, one day, you will see that water has gathered quietly in the field of your heart. Walking home, Sagara looks more closely at the grass and the dusty road. He thinks to himself that today was not only a day survived, but a day where a few small raindrops still fell. If your days also feel like they are only passing by, may this story sit beside you tonight and help you notice one small raindrop of color in your own day. The heart that learns late, like a tree in evening light. Tonight's story begins in a small village near Savatthi. As the sun is setting, A man named Anuraka stands at the edge of a field, holding a worn shovel in his hand. He looks at the ground and whispers to himself, "Why'd I always understand everything only after it is over?" Since childhood he has been slow to notice what others see quickly. He missed good chances in the market because he hesitated too long. He only realized how much his parents were aging after they were gone. He noticed the sadness in his wife's face, only after many such days had already passed. With time he began to call himself a dull and foolish man. He felt like someone who always understands one step too late and regrets 2 steps too long. One evening Anuraka walks to the forest monastery, where the Buddha is staying. The Buddha looks at him gently and asks, "What kind of light is touching your heart this evening?" Anuraka answers in a low voice that he is always late to understand. People, chances, and precious moments. The Buddha points to a tree near the monastery. "Some leaves shine early in the morning sun," he says. "Some only show their deepest color in the evening light. Early color is not everything, and late color has its own depth." The Buddha explains that a heart which understands late is not only slow. Sometimes it is a heart that has begun to see more deeply. After many seasons have passed, walking home, Anuraka looks at the trees in the red evening sky. Some branches are already in shadow, while some leaves still hold the last light. He breathes slowly and thinks, "Even if I understand late, maybe I can remember longer and look more deeply from now on." If you too feel like you always understand things too late, may this story sit quietly beside you tonight, and soften the way you speak to yourself. As you breathe in and out, you might try whispering, "My heart may be late, but it is also learning to grow deeper." The heart that turns hard after too much enduring. Tonight's story began at sunset in a small village in Magadha. A woman named Debasara sat beside a water jar, swallowing all the feelings she had held back all day. Since childhood she had always been the one to stop fights and hide her own tears under a blanket. After marriage, whenever her mother-in-law spoke sharply, or her husband used harsh words, she pulled out a polite smile so the house would not shake. When she showed anger she felt like a bad person, but when she held it in, it felt like another stone was placed inside her chest. At some point she could no longer feel clear anger or sadness, only a hard heaviness deep inside. One evening Debasara felt she could no longer carry this alone, and walked to the forest monastery to see the Buddha. Under a tree the Buddha looked at her gently and asked, "What kind of weight is resting in your chest today?" After a long silence she spoke in a low voice, "I have spent my whole life enduring. When I show anger, guilt rises. And when I endure, the unfairness turns to stone inside me." The Buddha pointed to an old sack lying in the yard and spoke slowly. "If people keep throwing stones into a sack, one day, it becomes too heavy for anyone to lift. Your heart has become like that. You have pushed anger and hurt inside, until it is full like that sack." He continued, "You do not have to remove every stone to keep walking, but you must stop putting all of them into the sack, and begin to see where each one can be set down." Hearing this, Debasara felt as if one of the old stones inside her moved just a little. She realized that the anger rising in her was also a signal that she had been deeply hurt. Her years of endurance felt less like shame, and more like a sign of how long she had been standing alone. She knew she could not drop every stone at once, but a small courage appeared to choose just one stone and ask where it might be placed. If you too have endured and endured until your heart feels hard, may this story give you one small space to breathe. Tonight, instead of saying "I am fine" again, may you gently admit the weight of your own stones. With each in-breath and out-breath, may you softly touch the stone in the center of your chest, and quietly ask where even one of them might be set down. When you stand staring at someone else's path. Tonight's story begins in a small village near Magadha. A man named Nadaka stands on a dirt road, staring at his cousin's big new house on the hill. The wide yard and high roof make his own small mud house feel even smaller. A bitter thought keeps rising in his chest. His life went so far, what have I been doing with mine? Nadaka once tried business in the market and failed. Each time people praise his cousin's success, Nadaka smiles weakly and walks away. One day he can no longer bear the heaviness in his heart. He walks to the forest monastery where the Buddha is staying. The Buddha looks at him gently and asks, "What kind of wind is blowing in your heart today?" Nadaka says in a low voice, "When I think of my cousin, my life feels like a failure. I keep comparing my path to his and feel smaller and smaller." The Buddha points to the different paths leading to the monastery. Some come by a rocky road, some by muddy fields, some through deep shade. All arrive here, but each has seen different stones and trees. Then he points toward the fields. Some crops sprout in early spring, others ripen only in late autumn. Spring rice cannot ask autumn barley, "Why are you still like that?" Each seed has its own soil and season. The Buddha's voice softens. If you measure your life with another person's season, your heart will never rest. Look not through another's window, but from your own yard up to the sky. That evening, walking home, Nadaka sees his cousin's big house again. This time it looks simply like a house on another path. He enters his small yard and quietly sweeps the ground. In his heart he whispers, "From now on, I will walk and care for my own season, step by step." The River of Unseen Goodbyes. Tonight's story begins in a small village near Magadha. By the river where his daughter, Sarita's ashes were released, Bharata sits alone. He watches the water drift past and whispers her name. Only the river answers and regret tightens in his chest. He remembers paths he did not walk with her, and gentle words he kept inside. Feeling lost, he goes to the forest monastery, where the Buddha is staying. The Buddha asks what wave is moving in his heart. Bharata says his daughter is gone, and his heart is full of longing and apology. The Buddha looks toward the river and speaks softly. Yesterday's water never returns, yet people still call it by the same river's name. Her body is gone, but the life they shared now flows as a quiet current within him. Longing, says the Buddha, does not need to be a knife. It can become a lamp that remembers warmth. He tells Bharata to breathe with the ache, and to offer the love he could not give her to those beside him now. That night Bharata walks home with tears on his face, but a gentler weight in his chest. If you carry a name you can no longer call out loud, may this story sit beside you like a river as you fall asleep. The old cart and the fear of being a burden. Tonight's story began in a small village near Savatthi. As the sun was setting, an old man named Sanaka had once worked in the fields and carried heavy loads for his family. Now his legs were weak and even walking a short distance was difficult for him. He often felt thirsty at night, but hesitated to call his son or daughter-in-law. He thought to himself that they were already tired enough without him. Again and again a thought returned to his heart. I do not want to become a burden to my children. One day Sanaka slowly walked to the forest monastery, where the Buddha was staying. He sat down with effort and lowered his eyes. The Buddha looked at him gently and asked, "Sanaka, what kind of burden is your heart carrying today?" With a trembling voice Sanaka answered, "I am old and sick, and now my children must care for me. I fear that my life has become their heavy load." The Buddha turned his gaze to an old wooden cart standing by the path. "Look at that cart over there. In the past it carried many heavy loads across these roads. Now it is too old to carry such weight. Yet people still come and rest their backs against it when they are tired, and children climb and sit on it to play. The cart no longer carries goods, but it still gives people a place to rest." The Buddha looked back at Sanaka and said, "When you were strong you carried the load for your family. Now you can support them by allowing them to lean on you with their care. Caring for you is not only a burden, it is also a way for their hearts to grow gentle and deep. If you try to disappear because you fear being a burden, where will your children rest their own hearts?" Slowly, warm tears filled Sanaka's eyes. He felt that even in his old and weak body, there was still a place for him in his family. When he returned home he called softly to his grandchild, "My throat is a little dry, could you bring me a cup of water?" The child ran happily to do so, without any sign of annoyance. Sanaka watched and let his breath move in and out more calmly. That night he rested with a new thought in his heart. Perhaps allowing others to care for me can also be a quiet gift to them. The old water jar and invisible effort. Tonight's story began in a small village near Savatthi. As the sun was setting, a woman named Anandika had spent her whole life cooking, mending, and caring for her family and neighbors. Now the children had left home, and the yard that was once full of footsteps had become very quiet. In that quiet her heart began to feel strangely empty. She often thought that nothing of her effort had really remained. She could not remember many times when someone had said, "Thank you" to her. One evening she walked to the forest monastery, where the Buddha was staying. She sat down in front of him and spoke with a trembling voice. "Blessed One, I have spent my life taking care of others. But it feels like nothing is left for me." The Buddha looked at her gently, and pointed to an old water jar in the yard. "People come to this jar when they are thirsty, and they drink its water. They wash their hands and faces, and then they return to their own lives. No one says thank you to the water jar. Yet without this water their day would not flow in the same way." The Buddha turned his gaze back to Anandika and continued, "Your life is like that old water jar. Your quiet effort has cooled many burning hearts, and washed away much dust from many days. People may forget, but the hearts that received your water have already changed their direction a little. Tonight, do not try to prove all your effort to the world. Offer at least one ladle of water to your own tired heart." Warm tears slowly filled Anandika's eyes as she listened. The feeling that her life was meaningless became softer and less sharp. She thought that perhaps her days had been like hidden water in someone's dark night. Tonight, may you also remember that your invisible effort has already become water for someone's breath. May you quietly offer a small ladle of kindness to your own heart before you sleep.